Welcome to Your Pharmacy Career Podcast, proudly produced by Ravens Recruitment, the experts in pharmacy career and locum services for over 30 years. Every episode is your gateway to new opportunities in the pharmacy profession. From expert advice to inspiring success stories, we're here to spark ideas, guide your career, and help you achieve your goals. Stay tuned. The next step in your pharmacy journey starts here.
Welcome to Your Pharmacy Career Podcast. I am your host as usual, Christy Lee Patterson, and today I'm joined by someone whose story I've been looking forward to share for a long time. My guest is Curtis, a community pharmacist, and he has been in the community pharmacy industry for just over 40 years, I believe, and he's the current president of the Pharmacists Support Service. And up until recently, he was a partner at Emerton MCAL Pharmacy in Western Sydney, a pharmacy that he has built with his wife, Margaret, and his colleague, Matthew, over more than 25 years. Welcome, Curtis, to the podcast.
G'day, Christy. Always great to catch you.
Curtis, you've been, as I said, a community pharmacy owner for quite some time with your wife, but you've just sold your pharmacy fairly recently. And I just wanted to understand what does that feel like after being a community pharmacist for so long? And I'm sure you probably will say you are still a community pharmacist.
I definitely am a community pharmacist. Like so many of us, I live and breathe and occasionally bleed community pharmacy. It felt weird to start off with, to wake up in the morning and have no particular place to be. That felt really weird, but it is something that we are rapidly acclimatising to. But that being said, I am actually looking forward to getting into doing some other stuff, and I guess we can talk about that a little bit later. But after so long being responsible not just for ourselves, but for all the people that we worked with and for looking after the community, it's both a relief and a really weird feeling to wake up and really only be answerable to ourselves. So, yeah, funny feeling.
Yeah, it would be a very big change, from having to, wake up every day, get to the pharmacy. But as you said, we'll touch on to what you're doing now a little bit later in the episode. And so let's go back to the very beginning then. You can actually pinpoint the exact moment that you decided to do what you wanted to do with your life. So I'd love for you to share that with our listeners.
Sure. Well, age 15, I was absolutely certain that I was going to be a mad scientist. I loved science, and I pictured myself with a lab coat and crazy hair from having blown something up. And I had a job in a hardware store at age 16, and I realised that I liked working with the public. So that was kind of the start there. Then at about that time, I also had some pimples, not bad acne, just some pimples, and my doctor had prescribed some antibiotics for me. As happens, I took those, I ran out, and Mum sent me up to Mr. Manning, our local pharmacist, to get an owing script for the antibiotics. Mm-hmm. And he said to me, Curtis, your face is actually looking really good now. I don't think you need any more antibiotics. He explained the concept simply of antibiotic resistance and what the risks were of taking too many antibiotics, and said that if the doctor had prescribed it again for me, that he would actually phone the doctor and have a bit of a chat about whether that was really necessary or not. And at this point, I realised that this man that I looked up to was not only working with the public, but he was doing science in a really cool way. And from that point, I've never really wanted to be anything but a community pharmacist.
I love the fact that you say that you wanted to be the mad scientist. Maybe we can call you the mad pharmacist in the white coat.
Look, it probably wouldn't be the first time somebody's referred to me as a mad pharmacist, but probably not really a handle that I can stick on LinkedIn or anywhere.
That's really quite unique, and I think that definitely impacted your life at that point in time.
I suppose in some ways it is unique, but it probably shouldn't be. I don't know whether he knew anything much about me other than I was somebody that he wanted to make sure understood There were pluses and minuses for a particular course of action, and he was explaining that. In a bit of a full circle moment, my first boss actually trained under him as well. So there's this line of pharmacists that have come through. I was inspired by him, but my first boss was actually taught and inspired by him as well. So it was an interesting full circle moment to realise that as we got into it as well.
And so from that point in time, you thought this could be something that you could potentially maybe do in the future. And so when you were doing your pharmacy degree, but I would say it was probably just a few years ago, if I can be a bit cheeky. But from your experiences when you were a student to now, I know you're quite heavily involved in mentoring students and still being very active in our industry and what's happening. What were some of the maybe differences that you've seen? Like obviously, when you went through, pharmacists couldn't do vaccines and they couldn't do a lot of the things now. Can you maybe share some reflections or insights as to your experience as a student to maybe those students now?
Yeah, definitely. I think what I realise that has changed so much is that our community has always expected us to be there for them. And I think that's why pharmacists have had such a solid reputation for such a long time. But what we can actually do for our community now, you think about an outreach vaccination program, is an incredible thing that we can do to help to keep our community safe. The ability to take somebody into a consult room to have a discussion with them around starting something like an antidepressant when you know that somebody who's starting an antidepressant has been feeling terrible for such a long time. They've probably been offered an antidepressant a couple of times by their doctor or their doctors, and they've refused, thinking maybe I'll get better. And they've finally gotten to a point where they can no longer refuse that help. They're willing to take any help. So we now know that this person may be low enough to be contemplating suicide, and we're going to give them an antidepressant, which we know isn't going to make them feel better for at least 10 days to 2 weeks, and will keep improving for the first couple of months. But they will be thinking clearer within a few days, possibly sleeping a little bit better as well. So we need to ask them, have you been thinking of suicide? And we need to be able to sit with them and understand what we need to say when they say no, or when they say yes, or when they say no, but. And whatever comes after that but is so important to them, and it's probably what has driven them to talk to us. The ability to do that in a private consult room is such a big change. And I know that pharmacists have had consult rooms, and I know a friend of mine whose family have been through pharmacy for a long time and had consult rooms back in the 1970s. But that wasn't the usual. And the ability to have those private conversations and for people to open up about all sorts of things is something that's been a big and very welcome change to the way I've enjoyed doing pharmacy as a community pharmacist.
Oh, I would completely agree. And I think as maybe the years go on and in another 10 years, there'll be even more changes and things that are different. But I think at the end of the day, the thing that stays the same is, I guess, like the values or mission of a pharmacist. Like we're there to help patients and to really meet them where they are, depending on what that will look like. And as society changes and life changes and the world progresses, where they are will look quite different no matter where you are. So I think that's a really exciting thing for students now, being able to, just meet patients where they are, like as you said, with those vaccination outreach programs and things like that, I think is really, really quite exciting for students.
It really is. And I think Margaret and I have always talked about our role being health literacy. And the vehicle that we use to get into that conversation with people is obviously medication, sometimes prescriptions, sometimes it's Webster packs. And this is where, at the moment anyway, and for a long time I'm certain, AI cannot assess, a machine cannot assess somebody's level of health literacy, not like a properly trained pharmacist who has time to be able to spend with that patient. And so meeting people where they are is also understanding where they are. So we did a lot of outreach stuff in the pharmacy. And so that's physically going to where people are, but actually meeting them where they are in their heads and helping them to understand that although I might give you a cholesterol tablet on a Tuesday, you won't feel any different on Thursday. But hopefully on a Thursday in 15 years or 20 years' time, you won't have had your first heart attack. And if we can prevent people having their first heart attack by helping them to understand what they're doing and why, then I think we've done a great job for them. And I think that's what, to me, that's what meeting people where they are really means. Sometimes it means getting out of our space, but more often it means meeting them and finding out what it is that they understand about their health and trying to add a couple of layers to their understanding about their health so that they know how to look after themselves and their families that little bit better.
Yeah, so they can actually enjoy the life they have, right?
Absolutely.
So, Curtis, if I could maybe take you through the life journey of where you are now a pharmacist, was there any periods of time where maybe you doubted what you were doing, or were you very clear on where you wanted to go with ownership?
I always wanted to be able to run the business, and I had some great roles as pharmacist in charge or as pharmacy manager and really enjoyed those. I wanted to work towards becoming a pharmacy owner, but being both Margaret and me being the first university graduates in our families and not having owned businesses in the family, we didn't even know what that looked like. So when the time came, I needed to reach out to, and at the time it was to reach out to the wholesalers to find out where we could buy a business, how we could do that. And they were great at the time. And I remember going to one wholesaler and they said to me, have you thought of partnership? Because I know that there are people out there who want to kick their hands in but don't actually want to do the work. And in the back of my mind, I'd been pharmacist in charge at a busy dispensary with 30-odd people in the whole store, and the dispensary was probably half of that. And I felt like that sounded to me like somebody interfering. They want to keep their hands in. I didn't want that. I would have rather owned a small store and be in charge of the whole thing. I went to another wholesaler and the person there said to me, have you thought about partnership? Because I've got somebody who's looking for you. They have a business that they're looking to buy and they don't want to run it. They just want somebody who's passionate and ready to take it on. That might have been the same opportunity coming from both places. One of them was set up in a way that I felt like I wasn't going to be told what to do, but I was going to be given an opportunity. And what the opportunity was to have somebody else's money help us to buy a business that I couldn't have bought, or Margaret and I couldn't have bought on our own. And obviously with a larger business, there are more opportunities for growth, more opportunities for the team to specialise, more opportunities to develop as a business owner and as a pharmacist. And that was at age 33, which is not particularly young. And I think when I look back on my career, so much of what people know me for actually started about 15 or 16 years ago. I haven't been doing a lot of this for a long time. My first foray into any sort of representative work was on the at the time New South Wales Committee for PDL, and that was only 16 years ago. So it's interesting that the things that people know me for, it hasn't been my whole career. So much of my early career was just spent learning my skills, trying to deal as best I could with the day-to-day. I had done a master's in management about 5 years after I finished uni because I realised I was in management positions and didn't really have any skills for that. And that was good, but it wasn't an answer to itself. It was really teaching me a way to learn and understanding of management principles. And so that's where that started, and so much of what people do know me for has come from that opportunity that I was given back in 2008 to join the PDL Local Advisory Committee.
I didn't know that about you. I guess that's right. When you meet people and get to know them, you only know like the parts that you know, right? And people have lives before and after that they come into your life.
And I suppose what I want people to realise from that is that it's never too late. I was, whatever I was 16 years ago, I was 42 when I started with PDL. It was about 5 years after that, so I would have been 47 when I became a director for PDL. I was 52 when I joined the Pharmacists Support Service, and I was 55 when I became president of PSS. So all of these things are relatively late in life and late in a career. And I've had it's been a ride and a half, Christy, doing this stuff with people. But I'd like people to realise that where you are today and where you might end up, I never thought for a second that I would end up as a director on a national board, helping people to understand their roles and their responsibilities and thoroughly enjoying all of that, and that would then lead me on to PSS. So it's never too late, and you don't need to achieve everything by 27. It's okay for at 27, just picking that out of the air. I don't know why. At 27, our daughter was born. It was our first child, and we were busy as parents. So, yeah, it was interesting that, like I said, the things that people might know me for, most of that's been in the last 15, 16 years, and a lot of it a lot less than that.
That is a really great point, and I think it is something that's a really worthwhile takeaway point, because I know I personally am someone that wants to get everything done now, or actually yesterday. I don't know if that's just a personality thing. Maybe it's an ADHD thing. Maybe it's that now with social media and everyone is like, you're looking and seeing all these people achieving and doing things, which is great. Like, we should definitely as an industry be supporting and celebrating all these amazing people that are doing these great things. But yeah, I think sometimes that can sometimes come at a cost to those that are earlier in their career, and not even necessarily earlier as in by age. I was at a CSU alumni event literally just last week, and I was speaking to the Vice Chancellor there, and he had said that across Charles Sturt University, I don't know if he meant all disciplines or just pharmacy, I think it was all disciplines, but only 15% of students this year are high school leavers. The majority of them are mature age and true mature age. Like when I went to CSU in Orange for my pharmacy degree, I was considered mature age at 21. There was nothing mature about me at 21 now when I look back, although I'm sure I thought I was very mature at that age. And so if you are early in your career in pharmacy, but you've had a whole life experience or a whole life career in other areas, it doesn't mean that you've missed out. There's still plenty of opportunities for you in our industry.
Absolutely. And some of the best practitioners in anything, whether it's a school teacher or whatever, are the people who've actually had another career and then through that career have decided that there's somewhere else that they need to be, that they really feel that they can offer their passion and their insight to. And I think that's a really valuable thing. It's not my trajectory, but it's a really powerful thing for people to be able to understand that that's what they want. And then to understand that it's okay to change your career. So, yeah, it's a really interesting observation. 15% sounds really low, but it's a really interesting stat. So, yeah, fascinating.
Well, I'm 98% sure that was the exact number, but I'm sure I remembered it correctly because it was such a low number. I was very shocked by that, which, then got me thinking about all these other things of how do people learn and how do they perform best at university later in life. But maybe that's another podcast session.
Yeah, I'm sure.
Now, Curtis, I would love to know maybe a little bit more about your experience as an owner, and not just as an owner owning a business with other partners, but one of your business partners is also your life partner. And so I also think that that's also really amazing that you and Margaret have built this amazing pharmacy and built a life together, because I know for me and my husband, I don't know if I would want to work with him every day as well. And I purposely tried to meet someone that was not in pharmacy.
Sure. Look, I suppose I would start by saying that at age 33, there was still an awful lot that I didn't understand, particularly accounting, bookkeeping, rostering. I remain terrible at rostering. Just
I don't think anyone is
whatever,
perfect at rostering. I don't know.
whatever
I'm
reason,
waiting for AI to sort
I am
that
just
problem out.
terrible at rostering. But we had two senior partners. So we had Matthew and Tony, and Tony unfortunately now has passed on, but they were great mentors for me. And early on in the role, our kids were young. The pharmacy was mine and I was working in there. And I realise even now, as a single pharmacist in a pharmacy, and at the time there was only the one pharmacist at any one time, you very rarely get 3 minutes to work on one job before there's an interruption to do something else. Now, you may be able to put that second thing off, but that's an interruption, whether it's a phone call or a prescription to check or something else to do. That was something that I felt I did well, but I know I enjoy working in multi-pharmacist pharmacies a lot more than I enjoyed working as a single pharmacist. But they're very different skill sets. So that was one thing. Margaret is actually wonderful at rostering, and we had made sure that when we had things that we needed to discuss, a way forward, a plan, do we take option A, option B, we made sure that we discussed that between us so that when we went into the pharmacy, we were both pointing in the same direction. And the team knew that if they talked to one of us or the other of us, that they were going to get the same answer. Now, that's not to say that we didn't argue. We are a couple. We've been married for 36 years, and there are the odd bumpy road in that. And I'm sure the team could tell you when we were communicating well and when we weren't. And we often joke in the kitchen in the morning that some days we are like a ballet. There's beautiful coordination between the two of us, and it's like choreography. And there are other days when we're like dodgem cars and just bumping into each other. And our communication is a bit like that too. Sometimes we're on a wavelength with each other, and other times we struggle to really understand each other's point of view and then to come to some sort of agreement between us. So that is hard, but I cannot think of anybody that I would rather do pharmacy with than with the love of my life. We've spent so much time together, and they say that behind every good man is a great woman. But I think if your life partner is not side by side with you, either physically or metaphorically, they don't have to be there with you side by side in the room, but if they're not physically or metaphorically side by side with you, then you are letting the best in life pass you by. And some of our best days have been the days when the team have been off sick, and it's been Margaret and me manning the lifeboats and keeping things going with limited staff. And we turn up there, and the commitment in the morning is we're going to get through this together. And we walk out, sometimes hand in hand, to the car at the end of the day going, you know what? We nailed it today. We really did. And we've had our ups and our downs, and we've had a moment where we've said, you go and get lunch and I'll keep this going, or you go and just take a break, get out, do whatever you need to do. I got this. But that understanding between each other is really special, and it's something that I've really enjoyed from that time together.
No, that's wonderful. I really love that. And I think you're right. It's whether it's a business partner, life partner, what you've described is what a good partnership should look like. And so if I lean towards the business side of things, when you're going to be working side by side with somebody for a majority of the time, and it just brings such joy to me to hear you talk about yours and Margaret's relationship with like that. It's really wonderful. But I've heard other owners say that going into business with someone is like a marriage. And so maybe the fact that you and Margaret are life partners as well, that's why it's also worked, because you do know each other so well. You do know, I guess, the good, the bad, the ugly, the great, and you've figured out a way to deal with that, where I have seen some friends and colleagues be in partnerships that are toxic, like toxic relationships, and have tried to get out.
And it's interesting, our senior partner, when we were getting together and we didn't really know each other at all, and he said, you just need to have your hands above the table at all times. If we know what you're doing and why, we can back you. But if we start to wonder whether we can trust you, then we're in for all sorts of trouble. And so that communication that we always had between us. And I remember we had a particularly rough night. We'd had a staff member who'd done something which we wish they hadn't. And I rang the senior partner and said, I'm not exactly sure how to deal with this. I think I need to call this staff member in and have a chat. And this senior partner said, I will be there with you. I will sit there in the room with you. And Tony didn't work in the pharmacy and he didn't live near the pharmacy, but he said, you just arrange a time and I will be there. And that's the kind of backup that I think we all need. And it was great to have that backup. But of course, it goes both ways. He knew that I was managing his money well, and I knew that if I really needed him, that he would be there for me.
Absolutely. I think that's what everyone would like in their business relationships, as well as personal relationships.
Pharmacy Daily is a proud supporter of your pharmacy career podcast. If you're in the pharmacy world, it's a great resource to stay up to date with the latest industry news. To subscribe, just head to pharmacydaily.com.au to get the newsletter delivered straight to your inbox.
During these years of you owning the pharmacy, there's been a lot of things happening. There was global financial crises, there's been major world events, there's been epidemics. You name it, you've probably lived through them all. And being a pharmacy owner and community pharmacist. And one thing that I'm learning is that no matter what's happening in the world or what's happening in your community, pharmacy is always the one that's there, which can be great, but it can also be very demanding on you and your staff. And so what I'm leaning towards, that maybe these experiences may, or they probably have actually led you to get to where you are today with your role with the Pharmacists Support Services, and how passionate you are about people looking after themselves and others, especially with their mental health. But how did you get through all of these times?
Sure. So back in 2020, there was a global pandemic. I don't know if any of your listeners would remember that, but there was a global pandemic, and we actually needed to move our pharmacy. Our whole shopping centre was being renovated, so we were moved to temporary premises on the 29th of March. I remember the date, 29th of March 2020. And we then had 5 odd months to build a new pharmacy that we moved into on the 9th of September. And for anybody who hasn't done it, getting the approvals for the pharmacy, trying to design a pharmacy that you know is going to cost you an awful lot of money, and we needed to take out some pretty big loans to be able to do that. And you don't really know if the workflow is going to work the way that you plan it out. So we went and we had visited friends and colleagues all over the place to learn what we could, and then we had to design a pharmacy to fit in the space that we were offered by our landlord. And then we had to get the approvals. And with our business in Emerton is a low socioeconomic area. And that means that there are a lot of people on Centrelink benefits, which means that the vast majority of our business was actually PBS. And so if we miss the approval and we can't claim from Medicare, we lose well over 2/3 of our business until we can get that rectified. And so the pressure, you can't see this on a podcast, but the pressure was right up here. And then something went wrong. And it doesn't really matter what that something is that went wrong. It might be that a staff member got hurt and now we're going to have work cover come in and reassess all of our processes and go through that. It could be that a heap of money went missing and now we're going to struggle to pay our bills. It could be that a lot of stock was damaged and we now need to replace that. It could be that any one of dozens of things can happen. It wasn't about that one event. It was about everything that led up to that meant that I just could not cope at that point. I knew I was spiraling. I couldn't think about anything else except this one problem, even though I had all these other things I needed to do. And I couldn't sleep. I wasn't eating properly, and anybody who knows me knows that I love my food. And so I knew that I needed to reach out for help again. And this was not the first time that I'd made an appointment to see a psychologist, not the first time that I'd sat in a room with a psychologist describing the problems that I'd had. So I knew that's where I needed to go back to. And I made that appointment. And on the day, the 9th of September 2020, when we opened our pharmacy, I was there with my shiny boots that I'd polished the day before, a starched white uniform with my lovely wife standing next to me, opening what was the newest and, in our view, one of the best pharmacies in the country. And the next day was my first appointment with my psychologist. So I was simultaneously on an absolute high and almost as low as I've ever been because I knew that I needed to reach out for help. In the past, have also been a tutor for med students, and one of the tutorials that we ran for them was on peer support, mental health, and dealing with the ups and downs that life throws at you. And so I realised that I needed this help, and it was through getting through that was difficult. The team had opened the pharmacy with us on the 9th of September. On the 10th of September, I went for an appointment, and I think it was around midday, and everybody said to me, don't come back, take the afternoon off. And as difficult as that was, they knew that I needed that time off. And so I went, I had the appointment with the psychologist, started the process. And anybody who hasn't been to a psychologist before, that first appointment you feel like is a real waste of time. I spoke for 50 minutes and I got nothing. I got no advice. I got no tools. I got nothing. It's the second or the third appointment that they get to know you well enough to be able to help you to name what's going wrong and to maybe give you some strategies to deal with that. So anybody who's contemplating that or might need that in the future, just realise that first appointment is really not going to be that much use to you, but you need to do that just like you need to build a foundation to build a great house or a building as well. And that was really difficult. And Christy, if I can go just back to one more point, we moved our pharmacy on the 29th of March 2020. But I remember there was a day, it was the 18th of March 2020, and we were working harder than we've ever worked before. I was standing out the front of the pharmacy, trying to be a concierge, trying to tell people that we see them, we are working very hard, it won't take too much longer to get there. And so I was saying to people, if you'd come into the pharmacy, I'd say, Christy, we've got your script, we're doing it. And then I'd talk to the people in the dispensary, yes, Margaret's doing your script. So Margaret then knows that she's doing a script for somebody who's waiting in the pharmacy. You know that somebody in the dispensary is actually working on your script. So you know you've been seen. They know they're doing work that matters right now. But the stress was incredible, and we all remember that. And I remember Margaret saying at that point in time to the dispensary team, stop, everybody take a breath. This is not our emergency. What's important is that we do this once we do this right, and the people out the front will just have to wait, but they will be okay to wait if we get it right for them. And I watched every single staff member in that dispensary take a deep breath, straighten themselves up, and realise that they needed to do the job well rather than do the job quickly. And it was that leadership, probably the greatest single act of leadership that I've seen, was Margaret being able to take that time out and realise and be able to verbalise that to the team, and watching them take a deep breath and realise that, yes, it is stressful. It will be okay. We will get through this together. And I think that's one of the things that, being pharmacy owners who've been side by side with our team, I think that's one of the things that I've enjoyed the most, is being with them and having them support us and them knowing that we're supporting them as well.
Just everyone likes to know that you've got their back, right? I think you mentioned that in terms of your business partner, but especially in those stressful times, if you can trust the rest of your team will have your back and vice versa, and be able to communicate with them. They're kind of the two key things that I've just taken out from that story that you told, that, Margaret being able to clearly articulate that to the team, it was really, really important in that situation.
It was great, and it helped us to define the way we got through those early days of COVID when we didn't even know what safe looked like.
Yes, so true. I just had a flashback to that period of time's very clear in my mind, because I moved to Sydney on the 12th of March 2020, and I was moving from a frontline community pharmacist role to a head office support role. When it comes down to communication, we had sent communications to all our stores saying to close the clinic rooms or the consultation rooms, right? And it's just funny how different people understood what that meant. We thought, like, in my mind, I thought that just meant just close the door and just don't use it, right? But one particular pharmacy actually went and got like tape. It wasn't police tape, but this like yellow and black tape, and did a big X. I'm doing the movement, but I know people on the podcast can't actually see. And then they put a sign saying, "Do not enter." And like, that was a bit like, whoa. Like, I'm just having scenes of like, people wandering around with gas masks and things like that. But yeah, that communication, I think, is really important, and making sure that not just communicating to the team, but making sure that they understand that as well, and that you're both on the same page. Because in that situation, like the feedback then came back from the stores, like, oh, but the team said from head office that we have to close our consult rooms. Like, at no point did I say you have to get black and yellow radioactive tape and put it across the doors. But that's just, they thought they were doing the right thing, and they were doing the right thing, but it just then caused kind of more panic than what it probably needed to. Now, Curtis, I think for those people that maybe haven't met you or don't know maybe what you look like, we'll put a photo of your headshot on the podcast show notes. But if you don't mind me saying that, you probably do fit the description of the older white male. And so for me, I find it really interesting that when you talked about those times in your life that were where you needed to seek support, and then you went and sought support, would I be right in saying that that's kind of unusual for people that would, I guess, be in similar situations to you, because it's not really something that I guess men would do, if I'm just stereotyping here? And I think we do still have a long way to go in terms of men's mental health. Do you have any thoughts or comments on that topic?
Yes, sure. One of the things I would do when we would talk to somebody, if I would take somebody into a consult room as they were starting antidepressants, and I would give them a little bit of my story and say, your doctor has probably asked you to reach out to a psychologist or a counsellor. And I'd point to myself and I'd say, you might be surprised at the people who you think have their act together, who actually need to speak to somebody to keep their act together. And they would look at me quite blank, as if they were seeing me for the first time. Because it's a truism that our world was designed by older white dudes for the sole benefit of other older white dudes. That's how our world is designed. So if I'm struggling, then anybody can struggle. I don't deal with racism. I don't deal with sexism. I don't deal with ageism. I don't have family and domestic violence eating into the core of my being. I don't have any of that. And yet I've struggled even at a time when I was putting together my dream to be able to build your own home or design your own workplace is a dream for so many of us. And that's the point at which I was struggling, when I was flying in some aspects and absolutely plumbing the depths like I'd never done before at the same time. So I think that's something, and that's why I talk so openly about what I do, because I want people to have the vocabulary to understand and describe how they feel. Because if you can describe it, it's not nearly as scary as I don't know why I feel like this.
I would agree with that, because sometimes you can't, actually articulate why you feel like this, but you can describe those feelings. So that's a really good takeaway point that I think people should remember that.
I think for me, in the pharmacy, we were involved with an alcohol and other drugs service called Maramwajali. And one of the participants there, who's now a social and emotional wellbeing counsellor, has this superpower. She can describe how she's feeling and what she does to help herself and what she does that sabotages herself and her plans. And that strength to be able to recognise that and to be able to verbalise that so openly in front of other people is something that I truly admire and have tried to emulate. I'm not her, but I would like to think that I can be a little bit of that for the people I come in contact with as well. And so that's been a wonderful part of my development as a pharmacist as well, is being able to be there and experience that with some of those people at Maramwajali as well.
We talked about how you just recently sold the business, but what are you doing now? What's Curtis up to? What does a day-to-day look like for you now, post-ownership?
Yeah, at the moment, catching up on a lot of things that I let go when we were in a full-time plus kind of a role, managing a busy community pharmacy. I miss the team that we had in the pharmacy. We've had limited contact with them, but not a lot, as is probably appropriate. We need them to gel as a team with the new owners. But I'm now looking out to see what else I can do. And those passions, those things that got me out of bed over the last 5 years, whether it's harm minimisation, whether it's mental health for health practitioners, whether it's cultural safety or Indigenous health, or whether it's how we as pharmacists can help people who are experiencing family and domestic violence or coercive control. They're the things that I'd like to be able to lean into over the next few years. And I think at this point, you and I, that the family and domestic violence and coercive control, it's a passion that we share. And I think I'd like to say to anybody who's in the middle of that at the moment, that what you're experiencing is not your fault. And there are people out there, and we see you and we hear you. And most importantly, we believe you. And so it can be a very isolating experience to be in the middle of family and domestic violence or coercive control. And part of what is happening to you is meant to isolate you, but you are not alone. And I suppose that brings me on to the Pharmacists Support Service as well. It's was brought about in 1995 with the idea that pharmacists should not feel alone. And there is a team of volunteers who are there 8 a.m. to 11 p.m. Australian Eastern Daylight Saving Time. So we follow the Hobart, Melbourne, Canberra, Sydney time, 365 days of the year. And these people have done extra training like mental health first aid in their own time. They're unpaid volunteers. They are anonymous. And they are there just for a pharmacist, for an intern or a pharmacy student who may be having their worst day ever. And they just need to talk to somebody who understands what it's like to be us, to be a student, to be an intern who's trying to wade their way through an intern training program and get their hours up and pay their rent or whatever else it is that they have to do. To be able to talk to a colleague who understands that That's what PSS is there for. And that's why it's so important. That's why I'm so proud to be involved with PSS and to be able to be there for people. So that's kind of a off topic from the question that you asked, but I'm looking for some work to see where I, as an individual pharmacist, can help us as a profession in those areas, whether it be harm in family and domestic violence, cultural safety, Indigenous health, or anything that we can use to advocate for our profession to be a better help for the communities that we serve.
Now, Curtis, I just want to pick up a little point that you mentioned there around harm minimisation. Obviously it's an area that's of importance to you. Is that something that you actually focused on in the pharmacy when you were working there? And the reason that I ask that is, I haven't mentioned it yet, but your pharmacy has actually won 2 National Guild Awards in 2024. And I believe one of the awards was at Harm Minimisation Pharmacy of the Year, and the other one was Community Engagement Pharmacy of the Year. I guess from a harm minimisation perspective, the first thing that comes to my mind is just doing opioid substitution therapy. But I know it's so much more than that.
It certainly is. So harm minimisation goes from everything from nicotine replacement therapy. So we're all really involved in harm minimisation, helping people to quit smoking, right through to education, an AOD service like Maramwajali, or just in the pharmacy, things that you might share on the pharmacy's Facebook or Instagram. So
from that work that you did in your pharmacy with the team around harm minimisation, is that something that you did on purpose to become Pharmacy of the Year? Because I'm sure every pharmacy at some point has thought that they're deserving of the Pharmacy of the Year awards, but there's 6,000 pharmacies. So it is a very competitive thing.
Well, the Harm Minimisation Award didn't exist until 2024. So our pharmacy was the inaugural winner of that, and we'd set in place so much before that. So it definitely wasn't the reason for chasing the awards. But what had happened was with Harm Min, we got involved with Maramwajali, and it was just me trying to advocate for our profession. I'm sure everybody who's up here will cross paths with a pharmacist. Let me be involved with you so that they realise that we are actually on your side. And then looking forward to the refit of the pharmacy, we went and visited a lot of pharmacies, some of which were Pharmacy of the Year. And we realised when we learned from them that what we were looking to put together could actually end up being Pharmacy of the Year. But we put it together because that was what we wanted to do, and that was how we wanted to practice as practitioners, not because we were chasing awards as such. But for these awards, you have to put yourself forward, or somebody has to put you forward, and then you have to do a lot of work in the background to prove to the judges that you're actually worthy of it. So there is some work done in promoting that, but it wasn't the guiding principle behind what we did in either community engagement or harm minimisation. What we were doing was to make ourselves more useful to our community and to be where they needed us to be, and to enjoy our days. I know any day that I get to walk into Maramwajali, I walk a little bit taller as I walk out, because Maran's one of my happy places. And I just love being able to contribute to that as well.
You mentioned family and domestic violence, and we've had a number of conversations about this and where pharmacists sit and whether or not we should even be doing something in this space. And I think it's appropriate for me to share why I'm so passionate about this. And there's one kind of moment in time that kind of sticks out to me as an industry. And that's where there was it's still around now. So it's called DV Alert, so Domestic Violence Alert. It's a free government funded, I guess you call it a training organisation. I don't know what the correct term is. They actually have training for frontline healthcare workers, and you can do it online. They can come to your pharmacy. You can go, if you're in a more metro area, you can go to their training events, and it's all free. We'll put the link in the show notes. And the reason why I'm so passionate about it is because when I was a pharmacist in charge, a pharmacist manager, I was very young. I was only like 25 at the time, 25, 26. And I was managing staff members who were experiencing this, either themselves or their family. And they had disclosed this to me. And I didn't know what to do. I wasn't equipped with being able to deal with this. And anyone that's in a management position, they should absolutely do management training, because you soon realize it's not just telling people what to do and keeping them on task. You almost turn into this psychologist or counselor, and we're definitely not trained in that space. And so I wanted to do something to help for the team to understand, because that was one aspect to it. The other aspect was I had a patient come in and, she disclosed during a conversation about a new antidepressant in a consult room. And, she disclosed that to me. And I at the time, I didn't know what to do or where to point her to help.
Exactly. And as we've talked about, DV Alert is amazing, but it's aimed at social care workers or care workers who might visit somebody and spend 25 to 45 minutes with their clients. We get 1 minute with our patients, but we get that 1 minute every week or twice a week or every third week. And so it's a different relationship. And if we handle that poorly, we can actually make that person less safe rather than safe, which is why it's so good that there is some training aimed at pharmacists. So there's some on GuildEd, there's some on PSA website as well, but it's really just a start. There is so much more that we need to do. And the other one that is really useful, and we can stick this in the show notes as well, is there's a podcast called Small Business, Big Impact, which has Gretel Colleen as the host. And it's a 10-part podcast aimed at employers understanding their responsibilities as the responsibilities changed when family and domestic violence leave was brought in. So that podcast was released a year or so ago, and it's fantastic. Each podcast episode is about 25 minutes, so nice bite-sized chunks. And it talks about not only supporting somebody who is experiencing that, but what if your team member is the person who's actually using the violence? So it talks about how to broach that as well. So highly recommend that podcast to people as well. And I'd like to think that there's more that we can do, but it relies on having time and space and money to be able to do that. So, that's something that I'd like to be involved in. If somebody's looking to do that, find me and let's talk.
Absolutely. Let's talk. Well, Curtis, we've come to the end of the podcast. But before we go through our Rapid Fire 5, so this is a new, section of the podcast where I ask you 5 questions and you have to answer really quickly. Is there anything in particular that you want to share with our listeners before we jump into the Rapid Fire 5 that maybe you haven't covered off yet?
Not really. I think we've covered most things. I think just you're not alone. I think that's the thing that I want people to realise, that so much of what I've done, it's been done with me at the front, but I've never done this alone. And even back in 2020, when I was struggling my most and about to reach out for a psychologist, I had a friend, Chippy, Georgina Woods, who would check in on me every couple of weeks, just as somebody who understood what it was like to be a pharmacy owner and who knew me well enough that she could just ring me and check in on me. And I try to do that for some of my friends as well. And I know that when I reach out to somebody else, I get a bump as well. And we know from the work that Jenny Kirshner has done with PALS and loneliness, that just reaching out to somebody else makes us feel less lonely. So I think that's the thing I want people to take away, is that you're never alone. So yeah, that'd be the big thing.
Again, great words of advice or wisdom there. So time for our Rapid Fire 5. The first question is, what's the best piece of advice you have ever received or that you have given to someone else?
Best piece of advice I've ever had was, how big a mistake is determined by how long you keep making it. Often
interesting.
We realise that we're on the wrong path, but we kind of hope we can turn it around. And sometimes what we need is to turn away from that and do it. That was John Rossi, who was a rep that used to come into the pharmacy, and something that I've used when we've needed a reset sometimes, is to remember that.
Question number 2, what is one thing that every pharmacist should have in their self-care toolkit?
So I'm going to give you 2. So when we're not at work, it's something that takes them out of their head. So whether that be craft, exercise, gardening, music, dancing, Netflix, whatever that looks like for you, something that is completely different. And if you're married to your work partner, that's even more important. At work, it's the ability to recognise and name how you're feeling, as we discussed before. I think that's being able to name it is critical.
Question number 3, what's something that you wish pharmacy students should know now?
Peer support, just as we were talking about a few minutes ago, the ability to check in with themselves and each other. I know there are people that are working on this in the pharmacy schools, and I thank them sincerely for it, but I think pharmacy students, the ability to just offer real peer support, I think would be great.
Question number 4, what is the one thing that you're most proud of when you look back at your time as a community pharmacist to date?
Look, it's not really answering the question, but it was our team. With them, we could do anything. If I had to answer your question directly, I'd say it'd be our work in harm minimisation. We weren't the best, but we learned from others as we went along, and we did it because it felt like the right thing to do. And I've heard that the opposite of addiction is connection, and certainly learnt that at Maramwajali and in our pharmacy. That connection to people was really critical for us.
Now, the last question, I'm going to be a bit cheeky here. What's the Pharmacists Support Service phone number and who should call it?
Okay, so it's 1300 244 910. Any intern, pharmacist or registered pharmacist or pharmacy student can call 8 a.m. to 11 p.m, Hobart, Melbourne, Sydney, Canberra time, 365 days of the year, and you will be speaking to an experienced volunteer pharmacist who has chosen to give their time to be on the other end of the line for you.
Well, Curtis, thank you so much for your time today to chat. It's been great getting to know you a bit more and hear some of the reflections that you've had on your career to date.
Fantastic. Thanks so much for your time, Christy.
Thanks for tuning in to Your Pharmacy Career Podcast, proudly sponsored by the Pharmaceutical Society of Australia. The PSA is committed to empowering pharmacists through advocacy, innovation, and industry-leading professional development. To become a member or learn more about how the PSA can support your career, visit www.psa.org.au. Don't forget to subscribe, share this podcast with your colleagues, and join us next time as we continue to explore your pharmacy career journey.